I came home unannounced. That was the first mistake, not mine, hers. In my world, in the world my grandfather forged for me, you are always inspection ready. Your gear is clean, your weapon is zeroed, and your sector is secure. There are no unannounced visits, there are only failures of readiness. I stood on the porch of the house my grandfather built, the house where my mother lived and my brother was supposed to be cared for, and I knew. The air itself was wrong. Not a foul smell, nothing so obvious. It was the absence of a smell. The faint, clean scent of the medical-grade antiseptic I ordered by the case for my brother Leo's room was gone. The silence was wrong, too. Not peace. A dead, waiting silence. The kind of silence that follows an explosion just before the screaming starts. My name is Major Ava Rostova, United States Army. I had been in a place for 18 months where silence was the enemy and the heat was a physical weight. I had just stepped off a transport plane less than 12 hours before, the grit of a foreign desert still under my fingernails. I didn't call. I never did. Calling was an announcement, a warning. It gave people time to prepare their faces, to arrange the stage. I preferred the truth, raw and unscripted. The key turned in the lock, the familiar weight of the old oak door. Inside, the air was stale, layered with dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun slanting through the big bay window. Grandfather loved that window. He used to say it let the truth in. Right now, it was just illuminating the neglect. A fine uniform layer of dust coated the mahogany table in the entryway, the one that always held a vase of fresh flowers. The vase was there, but it was empty, a film of gray scum ringing its interior. I placed my duffel bag on the floor. The sound was unnaturally loud in the stillness. I did a quick visual sweep, a habit beaten into me by years of training. Living room, empty, cushions slightly askew. Dining room, chairs pushed in, table clear. Kitchen, a single dirty coffee cup in the sink. Nothing screamed of violence or chaos. It was worse. It was abandonment. It was the look of a place that someone had walked away from, confident they would not be returning anytime soon. Then I saw it, tucked into the corner of the hall, near the stairs, Leo's chair, not his day-to-day power chair, but his lighter, manual one. It was folded. A thin plastic dust sheet, the kind you buy at a hardware store, was draped over it, as if it were a piece of furniture being put into storage. My blood didn't run cold. It felt like it turned to ice, each individual crystal a needle of pure, sharp fury. Leo couldn't walk. That chair was his legs. To cover it was to erase him. I took the stairs 2 at a time. My boots made no sound on the thick runner grandfather had installed. My movements are economical, precise. I do not waste energy. I do not make noise unless I intend to. Leo's door was closed. Another violation of protocol. His door was to remain open at all times unless he requested privacy, a rule established for his safety, to ensure he could be heard. I put my hand on the brass knob. It was cool. I turned it. The room was dim, the heavy curtains drawn. The wrong smell was here. Not the clean scent of antiseptic, but something sickly sweet. The smell of infection. Leo was in bed, a thin sheet pulled up to his chest. He was pale, his skin having a waxy, translucent quality. His eyes were closed, but they flickered as I entered. Eva? His voice was a dry rasp, a piece of paper scraping on wood. I was at his side in 2 strides. I didn't touch him yet. I assessed. Dehydration was obvious from his cracked lips and the sunken look of his eyes. He was thinner than when I last saw him on a video call 2 months ago. Far too thin. I put my hand on his forehead. Fever. Significant. "I'm here, Leo," I said. My voice was level, controlled. Emotion is a luxury you cannot afford when you are the ranking officer on the scene. And in this moment, I was. "When did you last see Mom?" He swallowed, a painful, difficult motion. "Dunno, Tuesday? Maybe Monday." He licked his lips. "There's a nurse, comes in the morning. For a bit." It was Friday. 4 days. Potentially 5. The rage wasn't a hot flash anymore. It was a block of granite settling in my stomach. Cold, heavy, immovable. I gently pulled back the sheet. The smell intensified. I knew what I would find before I saw it. Pressure, sores, a constant danger for anyone with limited mobility, preventable with diligent care. Turning, cleaning, ensuring circulation. The one on his hip was bad. Stage 3, maybe 4. Angry red. Weeping. The sickly sweet smell of a Pseudomonas infection. Neglect. Gross, criminal neglect. I didn't cry. Crying is a biological release of overwhelming emotion. My emotion was not overwhelming me. It was fueling me. It was clarifying things with the brutal, absolute simplicity of a kill or be killed scenario. "She's on a cruise," Leo whispered, his eyes closing again. "She said she deserved it. She said you'd understand." I understood. Oh, I understood perfectly. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were steady. I first dialed a number I knew by heart. Dr. Evans, our family physician for 30 years, a man who had served under my grandfather in a MASH unit. I kept my report concise. Patient status. Suspected sepsis from an infected decubitus ulcer. Severe dehydration. I gave him the address. He said he was 5 minutes from the local hospital and would dispatch an ambulance and meet them there. He didn't ask questions. He was a professional. Second, while I waited, I opened my mother's social media page. I knew her password. She used the same one for everything, her birth date and Leo's name. The irony was a bitter acid in my throat. Her page was public, a carefully curated gallery of her martyrdom. Pictures of her looking tired but brave next to Leo. Long posts about the challenges and blessings of being a caregiver. Hashtags. So many hashtags. Caregiver life, special needs mom, my hero son. And there it was, the most recent post, from 3 days ago. A picture of her on the deck of a cruise ship, a cocktail in her hand, the sea, a brilliant, indifferent blue behind her. Her smile was wide, triumphant. The caption was a masterpiece of self-pity and manufactured grace. Finally taking some me time. It's so important for caregivers to recharge their batteries so they can continue their sacred work. So deserved after all my sacrifices. Don't worry, my sweet Leo is in the best hands. Self-care. Deserved break. Warrior mom. I stared at the image, the smiling face, the cheerful lies. The absolute sociopathic disconnect from the reality of her son, my brother, lying in a darkened room, literally rotting from her neglect. The best hands, a part-time agency nurse. That was the moment, the click. For years, my relationship with my mother had been a long, low-grade war of attrition. A battle fought with passive aggression, guilt, and her endless, draining emotional demands. I had endured it. For Leo. For the memory of my grandfather who had begged me on his deathbed to manage her. But this was different. This wasn't a skirmish over a forgotten birthday or a manipulative phone call. This was a catastrophic breach of the line. This was an act of dereliction of duty that had resulted in a life-threatening casualty. My brother. My responsibility. The war was over. I was transitioning to a new mission. A counteroffensive. Objective. The complete and total dismantlement of Elena Rostova's life, as she knew it. Rules of engagement. My own. The paramedics arrived, efficient and professional. They worked on Leo with quiet competence. I gave them his medical history, allergies, medications. I spoke in their language, facts, vitals. Timelines, no emotion. I was Major Rostova, coordinating a medical evacuation. It was a role I knew well. As they were loading him into the ambulance, I took out my phone again. I scrolled to a contact saved as contingency. It was David Chen, the junior partner at the law firm that managed my grandfather's estate. Grandfather had hired him straight out of law school. He'd seen something in the quiet, relentlessly sharp young man. He told me, "Chen doesn't think like a lawyer, he thinks like a strategist. You'll need him." I typed a short, 2-word text. Execute Scythe. I hit send. There was no hesitation, no second thoughts. Protocol Scythe was the name my grandfather and I had given to the doomsday scenario. The plan for the day my mother finally, irrevocably, crossed the line. It was a plan we had designed together in his study over a bottle of scotch in the last year of his life. A plan of overwhelming legal and financial force designed to be deployed with surgical precision. David's reply came back in less than 60 seconds. Acknowledged, assets frozen, notices served, APS notified, standing by for your next. Godspeed, Major. I followed the ambulance to the hospital. I sat in the waiting room while they worked on Leo in the emergency department. I did not pace. I did not weep. I sat perfectly still, my back straight, my hands resting on my knees. I was field stripping the past 30 years of my life, cleaning each component, inspecting it for weakness, and reassembling it into something new, something harder. My grandfather, General Andrei Rostova, was not a complicated man, but he was a complex one. He saw the world in terms of honor, duty, and legacy. His daughter, my mother Elena, was his one great failure, and he knew it. He saw her weakness, her bottomless need for validation, her casual cruelty disguised as self-sacrifice. He loved her, I suppose, in the way one loves a broken, beautiful thing one can never fix. But he did not trust her. His will was his final battlefield maneuver. It was a masterpiece of legal fortification. The house, a considerable portfolio of investments, a generous monthly stipend was all tied to one non-negotiable condition. Elena was to act as the full-time primary caregiver for Leo, who had been disabled in a car accident when he was 16. My mother had caused that accident. She'd been arguing with me on her phone while driving. She never admitted fault, of course. It was the other driver, the rain, the tires. It was never her. Grandfather made her the caregiver not as a reward, but as a cage. A golden cage, but a cage nonetheless. It gave her a purpose she could perform for her audience, a role that fed her narcissism. The devoted mother. But the will had teeth, sharp ones, clauses detailing what constituted neglect, stipulations for regular independent medical reviews. And the final clause, the one that activated Protocol Scythe, if at any time Eva Rostova, in her sole and absolute discretion, determined that Elena had failed in her duties, a chain of events would be triggered that would strip Elena of everything, every penny, every privilege. He had left me something else too, a key to a safe deposit box. In it was a single large sealed manila envelope. On the front, in his severe, blocky handwriting, were the words, "For when the politician reveals herself." I had never opened it. I had never needed to. Until now. Dr. Evans came out to the waiting room. His face was grim. "He's septic, Eva. The infection is in his bloodstream. We've started him on a powerful cocktail of intravenous antibiotics. We're admitting him to the ICU. It's serious. Very serious. A few more days and, well, you got here in time." I nodded. "Thank you, Robert." "What happened?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "A failure of command," I said. "It was the only explanation necessary. He was a military man. He understood. It was my command. Leo was my responsibility. I had delegated his care, and my delegate had failed. The ultimate fault was mine. A mistake I would spend the rest of my life rectifying." I stayed at the hospital for 3 days. I slept in the uncomfortable visitor's chair in Leo's ICU room. I spoke to the nurses and doctors. I read his charts. I monitored his vitals. My chosen family, as I thought of them, materialized. My command sergeant major, a bear of a man named Frank, showed up with 2 thermoses of coffee and a bag of donuts for the nursing staff. My executive officer, Captain Diaz, organized a rotating watch among a few trusted officers from my unit, not to guard me, to guard Leo, to be a physical barrier. They knew, without me saying a word, that a storm was coming. They just showed up. No questions, no fanfare. They brought magazines, food, clean socks. They sat in the hallway reading or working on their laptops. A silent, loyal perimeter. This is what family is. It is the unit you trust with your 6. The people who show up. On the 4th day, Leo was stable enough to be moved to a regular room. The fever had broken. The color was returning to his face. He was weak, but he was alive. He was safe. And that was when the storm made landfall. My phone, which had been on silent, began to vibrate continuously. I pulled it out. 37 missed calls. All from Mother. A dozen voicemails. Over 50 text messages. I didn't need to listen or read to know their contents. It would be a predictable escalation. First confusion, then indignation, then accusations, then threats, and finally the inevitable waterworks of the professional victim. She must have just gotten off the ship. She would have gone to the house, found the locks changed, and seen the official notice of eviction taped to the door, along with a notice of the pending APS investigation. Then she would have tried her bank card and found her accounts frozen. Her perfect curated world had been dismantled in 72 hours. I let the phone continue to vibrate, the frantic buzzing a counterpoint to the steady, reassuring beep of Leo's heart monitor. I read the texts. They were exactly as I'd predicted. "Ava, what is going on? I can't get in the house. Why is my card being declined? This must be some kind of bank error. Did you do this? How dare you lock me out of my own home? You have no right. I am your mother. You've always been a cold, jealous little monster. You can't stand that Leo loves me more. I'll call the police. I'll tell them you've kidnapped your brother. Eva, please, I'm sorry. Whatever I did, I'm sorry. Just call me. I'm scared. You're scaring me." The emotional whiplash was staggering. The sheer naked manipulation. I felt nothing. It was like watching a training film of enemy tactics, predictable, and therefore counterable. My response was silence. Silence is a weapon. It creates a vacuum, and a narcissist cannot stand a vacuum. They will fill it with their own escalating hysteria, handing you all the ammunition you need. I took screenshots of every single message, saved them to a secure cloud folder, and sent the link to David Chen with one word: file. Then I blocked her number. The next phase of her attack was to weaponize our extended family and her circle of friends, the flying monkeys, as one of my battalion's therapists called them. My phone started ringing with numbers I recognized: aunts, uncles, her bridge partners. I answered one call, from my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. "Eva, honey, your mother is beside herself. She says you've thrown her out on the street and won't let her see Leo. What on earth is going on?" Her voice was thick with manufactured concern, but underneath it was the thrill of gossip. I kept my reply short and factual. "Leo is in the hospital recovering from a life-threatening infection caused by months of neglect. Mom has been on a cruise for the last week. I am handling the situation. I have no further comment." I hung up before she could respond. I sent a group text to every family number in my phone. "Leo is recovering from a medical emergency caused by severe neglect. A formal investigation is underway. I will not be discussing the details. Please respect our privacy at this time." I was not asking for their support. I was drawing a line. You are either on the side of a sick, neglected man, or you are on the side of his abuser. There is no middle ground. The calls stopped. The quiet in the hospital room felt different now. It was not the silence of waiting. It was the silence of a secured fortress. Leo was asleep, his breathing deep and regular. My sergeant major, Frank, was sitting in the chair by the door, reading a paperback novel. He looked up as I finished my call. He didn't say anything. He just gave me a slow, single nod. "It said everything. We've got your back, ma'am. We hold the line." A week later, David Chen called. "She's lawyered up," he said. "Good. It means she's predictable now." His voice was calm, a perfect match for my own state of mind. "She's filed a motion to have the freeze on her accounts lifted and to have you removed as Leo's guardian. She's citing parental rights and claiming you're exerting undue influence. The hearing is set for next Tuesday." "Understood," I said. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing you haven't already provided. The documentation is ironclad. APS's preliminary report is damning. The hospital records speak for themselves. This is not a legal battle, Major. It's a formality. But she will try to make it a circus. Be prepared for that." "I'm always prepared," I said. "One more thing," David said. "The envelope from your grandfather. It's time." The morning of the hearing, I left Leo in the care of Captain Diaz and a very competent nurse. He was getting stronger every day, already making jokes about the hospital food. I drove not to the courthouse, but to the bank. I used the key my grandfather had given me. The safe deposit box was heavy. Inside, just as he'd said, was the large manila envelope. My hands did not tremble as I opened it. Inside was not a letter. It was a thumb drive, a small black rectangle, and a single sheet of paper with instructions from my grandfather's lawyer. The instructions were simple. "Give this to Mr. Chen. Do not view the contents beforehand. Trust the general's strategy." I drove to the courthouse. I met David in the hallway. He was impeccably dressed in a dark gray suit, a folder of documents under his arm. He looked like what he was, a calm, confident professional ready to do his job. I handed him the thumb drive. "The trump card," I said. He took it, his expression unreadable. Understood. The judge is a veteran, Marine Corps. He appreciates evidence over theatrics. David nodded toward the courtroom doors. She's in there, with her lawyer and her sister. I walked into the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected. My mother, Elena, was sitting at the petitioner's table. She was dressed in a conservative black dress, a string of pearls around her neck. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She was playing the part of the grieving, wronged mother. When she saw me, her eyes filled with a theatrical combination of pain and hatred. I felt nothing. I was observing an enemy combatant's posture. She was trying to project an image. I was there to present facts. I sat at the respondent's table with David. I did not look at her again. I focused on the judge, a man in his late 60s with a severe haircut and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. The hearing began. My mother's lawyer, a man with slicked-back hair and a loud tie, put her on the stand. He led her through a carefully rehearsed performance. She spoke in a soft, trembling voice about her life of sacrifice, about giving up her career, her dreams, to care for her disabled son. And this cruise, Mistress Rostova, her lawyer said, his voice dripping with sympathy, "Why did you take this trip?" "I was exhausted," she whispered, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Burned out. My doctor said if I didn't take a break, I would collapse. I did it for Leo. So I could come back stronger for him. I arranged for a wonderful, qualified nurse to be with him every day." The lies were so smooth, so practiced. I could see how someone who didn't know her could believe them. "And your daughter, Major Rostova," the lawyer continued. "What has your relationship been like?" "Oh, Eva," my mother sighed, a fresh wave of tears appearing on cue. "She was always distant, so severe, like her grandfather. The military took my little girl and turned her into this. She never approved of me. She always resented the bond I have with Leo. I think she's trying to take him from me. To punish me!" It was a masterful performance. I had to give her that. She was a brilliant actress. Then it was David's turn to cross-examine. He was quiet, respectful. He didn't attack. He simply presented facts. "Mistress Rostova, you said you hired a qualified nurse. Is this her sworn affidavit?" He placed a document on the projector. The affidavit was clear. The nurse was a certified nursing assistant, not a registered nurse. She was hired for 1 hour per day to provide a meal and basic hygiene. Her instructions, in writing from my mother, were explicit. "Do not contact me unless it is a life or death emergency. Leo can be very dramatic." "And these financial records, Mistress Rostova," David continued, projecting a series of bank statements. "They show that in the 6 months prior to your cruise, you spent over $15,000 from the estate's caregiving stipend on clothing, spa treatments, and salon visits. Can you point to the expenditures for the specialized medical equipment Dr. Evans recommended for Leo's room?" My mother faltered. I was going to order it. I was just looking for the best price." David moved on, relentless. The photos of Leo's infected sores, the social media posts, the frantic, abusive text messages she had sent me. With each piece of evidence, her composure cracked a little more. The trembling victim began to be replaced by a sullen, resentful woman. The mask was slipping. Finally, David addressed the judge. "Your Honor, we have one final piece of evidence. It was left in the care of Major Rostova by her grandfather, the late General Andrei Rostova, to be presented in precisely these circumstances." He handed the thumb drive to the bailiff, who gave it to the judge. The judge looked at it, then at a document David provided, which was the legal instruction from my grandfather's will. He inserted the drive into his laptop. A video file popped up on the large screen behind him. The face of my grandfather filled the screen. He was in his study, sitting in his favorite leather chair. He looked older, more tired than I remembered, but his eyes were as clear and sharp as ever. He was in his full Class A uniform, his medals a formidable block of color on his chest. He looked directly into the camera, as if he were looking right at me, right at the judge. His voice, when he spoke, was the voice I had heard my entire life. The voice of command, calm, measured, and absolutely certain. "My name is General Andrei Rostova," he began. "If you are watching this, it means my daughter Elena is attempting to contest the terms of my will regarding the care of my grandson Leo. I have recorded this statement to provide clarity and context, free from the emotional manipulation at which my daughter is so tragically proficient. My mother made a small choking sound. Her face had gone completely white. I love my daughter, the general continued, his voice devoid of sentiment, but I do not labor under any illusions about her character. She is a creature of surfaces, a performer who craves an audience. Her capacity for genuine sacrifice is non-existent. Her love is conditional, transactional. I have witnessed it my entire life. I saw it in the way she neglected her children's emotional needs in favor of her social calendar. I saw it in her refusal to accept any responsibility for the accident that disabled my grandson. The courtroom was utterly silent. There was only the sound of my grandfather's voice, a ghost testifying from a perfectly executed plan. I established the caregiver provision in my will not to reward Elena, but to contain her, to give her a role that, if performed correctly, would ensure my grandson's safety and her own financial security. It was a leash, not a gift. I feared a day would come when her vanity and self-absorption would cause her to slip that leash. If that day has come, if she has failed in her one solemn duty, then she must be held accountable. He paused, his gaze seeming to intensify. My granddaughter, Major Eva Rostova, is the executor of my legacy, not just my finances, but my honor. She is everything her mother is not, disciplined, selfless, and pathologically responsible. She has never once in her life failed in her duty. The decision to invoke this final protocol would not have been made lightly. I have given her my full faith, my full authority, and my explicit command to act as she sees fit to protect her brother. She is the rock upon which my family is built. Her judgment is to be considered final. He leaned forward slightly. To the presiding judge, I was a soldier for 40 years. I know character. I ask you to trust my assessment. Do not be swayed by the performance of a professional victim. Look at the facts, look at the evidence, and protect my boy. Andrei Rostova signing off. The screen went black. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a checkmate. My mother was staring at the blank screen, her mouth slightly open. Her lawyer looked like he had been physically struck. The judge took a long, slow breath. He removed his glasses and polished them with a cloth. He looked at my mother, and for the first time, his expression was not one of impartiality. It was one of cold, professional contempt. The look of one old soldier recognizing the truth spoken by another. His ruling was swift. It wasn't a judgment, it was a surgical strike. Motion to lift the asset freeze is denied, he said, his voice like gavel strikes. Motion to remove Major Rostova as guardian is denied. Pursuant to the explicit and validated terms of General Rostova's will, Elena Rostova is hereby stripped of all caregiver rights, residential rights to the property at 142 Oakmont Drive, and all financial stipends and benefits related to the Rostova estate, effective immediately. He wasn't finished. Furthermore, this court finds sufficient evidence of gross negligence to warrant a permanent restraining order. Mr. S. Rostova, you are to have no contact, direct or indirect, with Leo Rostova or Major Eva Rostova. You will remain 100 yards from their persons, residence, and place of work or recovery. A copy of this court's findings will be forwarded to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal charges. He looked directly at me. Major Rostova, he said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. This court commends your restraint and your decisive action under difficult circumstances. Your grandfather would be proud. You are dismissed. My mother finally broke. It wasn't a cry of sorrow. It was a raw, guttural sound of pure rage. The mask was not just slipped, it was obliterated. You will not get away with this, she shrieked, her voice shrill and ugly. She pointed a trembling finger at me. He is my son! You stole my son! You will regret this! The bailiffs moved in, flanking her. Her lawyer was trying to calm her down, but she was beyond reason. She had lost her audience. She had lost her power. All she had left was impotent, screaming rage. I didn't look at her. I didn't acknowledge her. She was just noise. Irrelevant data. I stood, turned to David Chen, and gave him a single, sharp nod of thanks. Then, I turned my back on her and walked out of the courtroom. I did not look back. I did not need to. The mission was complete. The drive from the courthouse back to the hospital was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove. my hands steady on the wheel. There was no elation, no sense of victory. There was only a profound and immense quiet, the quiet of a long war finally ended. When I walked into Leo's room, he was sitting up in a chair talking to Frank. He smiled when he saw me. It was a real smile reaching his eyes. "So?" he asked. "Did you win?" "The situation has been resolved," I said. "We're going home tomorrow." "Good," he said. "Their jello tastes like plastic." Frank stood up, clapping me on the shoulder. "Never a doubt, Major. Never a doubt." His big hand was warm and solid. He and the rest of my team had already arranged for a medical transport service for the morning. They had already had the locks on the house rekeyed again, just to be safe. They had already stocked the fridge. They had just handled it. Because that's what a unit does. The first week back in the house was strange. It was our house now, legally, unequivocally ours, but it was filled with the ghosts of our mother's life. Her clothes were still in the closets, her knickknacks on the shelves, her perfume scenting the air in her bedroom. It felt like an enemy-held position that had been captured but not yet cleared. So we cleared it. Leo, from his wheelchair, directed the operation. I was the muscle. We were methodical. We went room by room. Every item of her clothing, every tube of lipstick, every framed photo of her was placed into large black contractor bags. We didn't keep anything. We didn't donate it. Donation felt like passing on a contagion. David Chen arranged for a junk removal service. We watched from the front window as two men hauled away 30 years of her life in less than an hour. When they were gone, the house was empty. Bare walls, bare shelves. The silence was different. It wasn't the dead, waiting silence I had come home to. It wasn't the oppressive silence of a house where everything was a performance. It was a clean slate, a new silence. It was peace. It was earned. We started to rebuild. We painted the walls. Leo chose the colors, bright, warm shades to replace the sterile beige she had favored. We ordered new furniture, things that were comfortable and functional, not just for show. My team, my chosen family, showed up on a Saturday. They didn't ask. They just arrived with pizza, toolboxes, and paint rollers. We worked all day, laughing and telling stories. Frank, a master carpenter in his civilian life, built a custom, beautiful oak ramp from the back door into the garden. Captain Diaz, an IT genius, set up a new state-of-the-art smart home system so Leo could control the lights, thermostat, and entertainment system from a tablet. At the end of the day, we sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by takeout containers and empty water bottles, and it felt more like home than it ever had before. This was real. This was earned. This was the family we had built, forged in loyalty and mutual respect, not the one we had been assigned by the accident of biology. In the months that followed, we found our rhythm. I took a leave of absence from the army, something I had never done before. I learned the routines of caregiving myself. Not as a performance, but as a duty. A privilege. There was an honor in the quiet, repetitive tasks, changing dressings, administering medication, helping Leo with his physical therapy. It was a different kind of mission, but a mission nonetheless. The objective was health, dignity, peace. With the estate now fully under my control, I worked with David Chen to fulfill my grandfather's true legacy. We used the substantial funds that had once paid for my mother's lifestyle to establish the Rostova Initiative. It was a foundation dedicated to providing respite care and support services for the families of disabled veterans. We turned the poison into medicine. We used the money born of my mother's neglect to ensure that no other caregiver would feel so burned out that they would abandon their post. We created something that honored my grandfather's name, not by talking about service, but by providing it. I never heard from my mother again directly. Aunt Carol told me she had moved in with her for a while, then left, heading to Florida with some man she had met. She was building a new life, a new narrative. I was sure that in her version of the story, she was the tragic heroine, betrayed by her monstrous, ungrateful children. It didn't matter, her story had no power over us anymore. She was a ghost, a bad memory. She had been excised. One cool autumn afternoon, about a year after I came home, I went up to the attic. I found what I was looking for in a cedar chest, my grandfather's dress uniform. I took it downstairs and laid it out on the dining room table. I spent hours polishing the brass buttons until they shone, cleaning the rows of medals, each one representing a chapter of his life, a tour of duty, an act of valor. The next morning, Leo and I drove to the National Cemetery. The rows of white headstones stood in silent, perfect formation. We found his grave, nestled under a large oak tree. The inscription was simple: Andrei Rostova, General, U.S. Army, beloved husband, father, grandfather. I didn't bring flowers. Flowers die. Instead, I took a small, heavy object from my pocket. It was a single, perfectly rendered general's star, which I had commissioned from a jeweler. I knelt and placed it on the top of the headstone, right in the center. I stood up and took a step back. I looked at the stone, at the star shining in the sun. Leo, beside me in his chair, reached over and took my hand. I straightened my shoulders and brought my right hand up in a slow, perfect salute. A salute from one soldier to another, a report. Mission accomplished, sir. The perimeter is secure. Your legacy is safe. As I stood there, I finally understood the truth that he had tried to teach me all my life. Honor isn't what you say. It isn't the stories you tell about your sacrifices. It isn't about being the star of a tragedy you wrote for yourself. Honor is a verb. It is in the showing up. It is in the holding of the line. It is in the quiet, daily, unglamorous execution of your duty. Real power isn't the ability to scream and manipulate and command the spotlight. Real power is the quiet resolve to do what is right, especially when no one is watching. Legacy isn't what you leave behind in a will. It's who shows up to clear the field after the battle is over. It's the chosen family who brings pizza and toolboxes, who stands the watch, who proves that the strongest bonds are not forged in blood, but in the shared foxholes of our lives. The silence in the car on the way home was a new kind of silence. It wasn't empty. It was full. Full of peace. Full of respect. Full of an earned and finally unbroken calm.